Compromise has its place, but it is a terrible way to start. Compromise, you hear marriage is a compromise. It's like, well, is it? I mean, yes, in certain aspects, of course it is. But when studies have been done on this, that with people who, they may not use the label, but when they're behaviorally and their thinking and their expectations are more in keeping with marriage as a collaboration, those marriages tend to be an awful lot stronger. And it's the same with the business relationship interaction. Again, internally with your own staff, team, externally with clients, you name it, right? Is if you start with the question, how can both of us have 100% or more of what we want, then you're in a good place, because then your expectations are right up in the corner of both of us getting what we need versus one of us getting more and the other not. And then it's kind of, because when you go into this relationship where it goes straight to compromise, it's only a little step further down that ladder toward bitterness and toward, well, what's the point really?
Do you know the secrets to a successful, productive negotiation? If not, keep listening. Welcome back to another episode of Leading with Integrity. And today I'm joined by my next guest, Mr. Al McBride. He is a negotiation and communications coach. He's a facilitator and trainer, a guest lecturer at UCC. He's a mentor, and he's also the host of the Dealing with Goliath podcast. So in case you hadn't guessed, today we'll be talking about negotiation and communication. There are some great tips here for business owners, salespeople, and of course, new leaders or managers on how to ensure your interactions, conversations are productive. They deliver the best outcomes whilst remaining ethical, kind, and avoiding confrontation. Do listen to the end, or as always, check those show notes for links to learn more about Al and what he does.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
Al, welcome to Leading with Integrity. It is wonderful to have you on the show. Really grateful for the opportunity to return the favour as well, because you have me on your show, of course.
Pleasure to be here, David. Yeah, thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to this conversation. And to kick us off, I'm going to push you in at the deep end a little bit to introduce yourself, tell the listeners a bit about yourself, your career so far, what you do, why you do it, similar questions.
Really. Okay, well, we'll start with a fairly short bio, and then I suppose you can ask questions that you're more interested in rather than areas that you're not.
Fair enough.
So in short, I am a communication and negotiation trainer and consultant and coach. So what that means is I work with people who are having what you might call high stakes conversations. So conversations where they usually have some skin in the game, where the outcome has a magnitude effect of very good things if they do it well, and very painful and pleasant things should they not do it terribly well. And I work with leaders, both who are business owners, that's sort of one cohort, and the other are executives in corporations. And there's a few other, what would you call, different groups as well, such as, STEM people, so people who are engineers and scientists. And in that, it's all around that same central thread of how to communicate, but in this era, how to communicate with people who aren't like you, who maybe don't understand what you understand. And again, it's coming back to that theme of getting inside the heads and the hearts, dare we say, the emotional states of your counterparts, so that you can build rapport with them and have greater influence with them or on them to get a hopefully mutually beneficial outcome. So a little bit more about me. I've been a business owner Started my first business when I was about 21, and then I was an art dealer, and so learned the trade there because I did art history with psychology, that sort of thing. So I initially went one direction, and then when that, due to the crash, didn't work out so well, I had to reinvent myself. And so I went more the other direction into the coaching, facilitating, training, and then consulting sort of field. So I know the business owner experience and the standard, the regular stresses and strains that they have, both internally and externally. As I have been one in various industries, as well as many of my good friends and mentors and whatnot have of course been in that field as well. On top of that, I have guest lectured in a number of universities in two different areas. One being cognitive behavioral coaching, which was part of a master's program in management and personal coaching in University College Cork, and in the Innovation Academy in University College Dublin in the area of enterprise and entrepreneurship. So that was all around innovation methodologies, lean startup, all that sort of stuff. So a lot of my methodologies that I bring to a lot of clients, particularly at the moment, is focused through a program I call Dealing with Goliath, which is actually the name of my book, which came out last year. Happy to say a bestseller on both sides of the Atlantic, he says. Yay. But yeah, and that's what it's called, Dealing with Goliath. That's the name of the podcast as well, because that kind of became kind of a brand that I took to heart about 10 years ago when I was specializing more and more into negotiation. And was that idea of, the little guy up against it versus the big guy, and often feeling pushed around and bullied or whatever. And that's not always the case, but it's very much the case that a lot of my clients, not always, but a lot of them, tend to associate with the David, where at the very least a third party looking on would say they're in the weaker position. Even if they don't believe it themselves and they fully back themselves, that's awesome. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. We can go into those types. But that's just a quick overview.
Okay, thank you. I mean, there's a lot there that we could pick into, isn't there? So, I mean, art history and psychology, was that what you studied at university, was it, before you started working? I mean, that's an odd combination.
Yeah, I went to do psychology up in Scotland. So I am Irish originally. But I went to college in Scotland, and you had to do other subjects around psychology. And I wanted to do modern history, but it clashed. So I thought, art history, that looks like fun, he said, not knowing the impact on his life. And the rest, as they say, is history, or art history, as it may be. So yeah, as I said, I went that way initially into the art stuff. I was an art dealer, art consultant for many years. For a number of years. And then, as I said, with the crash, then I had to... Luxury goods weren't selling so well or so easily, particularly in Ireland, where there was also a massive property crash as well as the rest of the global crash. And so nobody was doing that. So I pitched it, the art business, as kind of, how would you put it, like an art consultancy. So instead of going into a gallery where people would only have a limited number of options of the artists on the wall, I basically said, you come to me, I'll work out your needs, the budget, everything else, and then I'll give you a selection, but from the entire art available in Ireland or further abroad if need be. So I worked a lot with architects, interior designers, and business, as well as private clients. But it was a model that was sort of proven in London and in New York and other fancy places, and so I kind of did a version of that while it lasted, while it went well and the economy was healthy. But yeah, then I moved, as I said, out of that and back to the first love, which was psychology. I did more foundational courses in counselling. I thought I'd go that direction, but then it went more the business coaching side rather than psychotherapy end of things.
Yeah, interesting. And so the negotiation aspect of it, what drew you to that focus, if you like?
Two things. One was a request. I got a client was referred to me because it was sort of a communications issue, but it was most definitely negotiation. And it was an individual who had a ton of actual experience in negotiation, and done pieces of it in management courses and all sorts of things. So he wasn't a newbie by any stretch. However, although he was very senior in his company was quite a substantial Irish company. The person he was negotiating with was with a much bigger company again. So it's very much that, you're only a big fish depending on the pond that you're swimming in, and all of a sudden he goes to this other pond. Not all of a sudden, there was a legacy thing, ongoing thing, where even though he had all this experience and all these qualifications, he still felt he was kind of pushed around, and bullied is a bit too strong a word, but not far off, where he was like, I need something different here. I need an edge. So I was very much working with, which I still built into the Goliath methodology later on, very much managing and directing his own emotional states. So he's less perturbed by the actions and statements or any kind of perceptions of attack, subtly or overt, from the other side. And when he was able to manage his own emotions, then you're able to free up a lot of possibility, because people just aren't very creative problem solvers when they're in survival mode and feeling attacked. Okay, very few are. A few really brilliant people are, but that's pretty rare. So I worked with them on that basis. And it sort of did just highlight to me that, having read a load of negotiation books before, more so in the selling end when I was, doing the art side of things, I then brushed up in anticipation for him reading an awful lot of the more contemporary negotiation. And I was like, there's a lot of overlap here with coaching. Like, it must be so much easier to teach, really experienced coaches negotiation skills than the other way around. But as one of my clients said, in some aspects, not all, but some aspects, is like, you coach me and how to coach me and my counterpart to a better outcome. That's basically what I do for my clients. Now, as I said, I blend that with what makes it unique or differentiated is I blend that with the innovation methodology for being able to open up the other side in those discovery calls. A lot of the psychotherapist skills are in there as well, a lot of motivational interviewing, and other practicalities and modalities like that, to name a few, where it's a principle I call think like a shrink, which is, because think like a coach doesn't sound as cool. But it's the same principle as, like, how does a coach or a top coach or a psychologist, a therapist, react to strong emotional reactions at them? Well, they don't get jibed up and shout back at them or threaten back at them. They're fully emotionally present, but emotionally non-reactive. So it's not that they're non-emotional, it's that they're non-reactive to the individual attempts to emotionally provoke them in whatever way, that, again, subtly or very overtly. So it's those sort of skill sets that I built in that seem to be a nice and quite a unique combination, as well as I said, then how to open up the other side with that discovery, finding out some of the, not just reading between the lines, but actually getting in between the lines and really clarifying. And then on top of that, how to then start getting you and the other side to solve each other's problems. I mean, that's kind of the promised land. A lot of people don't even get there. But even long before you get to that kind of next level situation, there's still huge value in even the first few steps of not reacting to the jibes, either with your own stress response, or just if somebody's having a bad day and they let fly at you, whether it's a ploy or a tactic or not, and you're still perfectly professional but quite kind, then the next time they meet you, they're far more likely to be like a little bit sheepish, and then, oh, you're not bringing it up and you're not attacking me back. Oh, this person's kind of cool. I can kind of work with this person. Okay. And so you have this base, trust-based rapport building there, which can be highly helpful, and then later, hopefully, highly profitable too.
As you were talking there, so it strikes me, and I think we're going to find this all the way through a conversation, aren't we? There's quite a lot of parallels between the negotiation, the psychology, the communication aspects of your work, and leadership, and what we probably would both agree is good versus bad leadership. So, I mean, there's two that have popped out just from what you've been talking about there. I think one is that there's some big myths, I think, surrounding both of these.
Yeah.
And then I think the second parallel is that one of those myths, I suspect, in both cases, is perpetuated by the way these things are shown in popular media, shall we say, in like the films and the TV. Because in the case of leadership, you know, it's the big grand leader leading from the front and punching first and all that sort of thing. And I think in negotiation, like the way that's often portrayed in film and TV, it's about who can get the best of the situation of their opponent, and it's very adversarial.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, are there other myths? Do you agree or disagree as well?
Oh, no, well, initially, yes, absolutely. I mean, leadership and negotiation are key because it's to expand the definition of negotiation. Most people, actually, one of the biggest problems I have is that, and I literally have colleagues and friends, whatever, past clients saying, I know most of the people I work with could do extremely well working with you or taking your course or whatever, even just reading your book. So, but they don't really realize they negotiate. And I say, I know 90% of them do. And that's the point. Like, most people think I need to be sitting across a table, a big boardroom, and we're all serious and we're all trying to get the upper hand on some 6 or 7 or 8 figure deal or something, you know. And it's like, yes, that is one aspect of it, one tiny part of it. If you are trying to have someone change how they think and then how they act to be more in line to what you're thinking that you should think or they should think and act, then you could be said to be negotiating. Literally, it's as simple as that. If you're trying to communicate to influence where there's higher stakes, then you're negotiating. Simple as that. So, like, everyone's like, oh, well, I do that every day. Yeah, exactly. You do. You know, when you're, it's quite funny because you see great negotiators and then you see them trying to negotiate with their 3-year-old. And then you're like, let's see how this goes, right? Some of the great negotiators are ironically great negotiators, 3-year-olds, and they completely corner their parent.
I was going to make a joke there about negotiating with terrorists. So, yeah.
Exactly. 3-year-old terrorists. But sorry, so that is absolutely a factor right there, and that the same communication comes across, as does the power play thing. As you said, a lot of what people think are negotiation at the further end of win-lose negotiation is literally, they don't even call it negotiation. A lot of negotiation theory or schools, they just call it the power play. You're not negotiating, you're just demanding. Bang, this is take it or leave it. Like, when it's take it or leave it, that's an ultimatum. It's not a negotiation. And that can be a part of a wider negotiation on certain issues or the whole thing. And there's often the example of Apple with the iPhone. They shook everything up when they went to all the telecommunications companies globally and said, we have something nobody else has, and our nearest competitor is going to be at least 12 to 18 months before they get anything to rival this. And we're going to sell it initially through only one in each zone, I think it was. But you're going to give us a chunk of the person's phone bill, not just the unit cost. And this was unheard of. And they literally said, take it or leave it. Or like yes, but let's talk terms, basically. So there was no kind of real negotiation on some of the key parts, just on how that was going to be delivered. So that's kind of just, and that's really one of the first rules of negotiation is, do you need to negotiate? Because sometimes you just know your worth, know what you need, and like, that's the price. If you're not happy to pay it, too bad. Thanks, I'll go somewhere else. And neither of you are bad people or anything like that, but it's just that I have the cards here, you know, I don't need, like Apple, they're just like, yes, no. There's no negotiation needed here unless it's on yes, but on a few details, you know. And that is one of those first principles. But as goes leadership, yeah, I mean, people are leading all the time in the sense that they're having conversations. You're trying to influence internally, externally. But look, with leadership's the same thing. You start by who's the first person you lead? Yourself. And it's not just a cliche, it's actually true. And as I start usually in my course, you know, who are you negotiating with, and say, oh, the counterpart, and then particularly litigation lawyers where there's loads of different parties, like, who else are you negotiating? Oh, my client, yes. Who else are you negotiating? Well, the other side, of course. Who else? The other side's client. Who else? And they sort of, and then one bright spark will go, yourself. And they as a particular group are surprisingly creative, brilliant creative people, terrifying actually, with a dark creativity, but impressive nonetheless. But the other side, as I say, is they're more aware of who they need to be when they turn up. It's like, oh, I need to be kind and empathetic to my client, but they expect me to be an attack dog to the other side. And they get that there's these different versions of which one of you is going to turn up. That's at play immediately, which an awful lot of people kind of they just habitually turn up in different roles in a certain way, whether it's as a parent, as a spouse, as a child, as an adult child, or with a sibling, with friends. There's certain roles you just habitually fall into, and it's similar with business. And you do that because it's worked for you in the past, so you continue to do it. But most of every form of any corporate training whatsoever, unless it's completely new, is helping people realize what might be out of date as a behavioral response or methodology or strategy, and then updating it to something more important. Because what people do is they keep that schema of something worked once at the past, and then they copy and paste it into increasingly less appropriate situations until it's totally disastrous. And it's probably the same with leadership,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the added difficulty with leadership is they've got that example of the person who's leading them, who's probably doing the same thing, but like 5-10 years older than what you're thinking.
Exactly. So, and they're making similar and whole new mistakes themselves.
Yeah, we could talk about the frustration of organizations that don't train their people to do these things and how that perpetuates the wrong methodologies and things. But I don't know if we've got time to go into that in enough detail.
Well, yes and no, David, but
4-hour conversation.
This is why, I do one of my subsections, not really my flagship service, but I do something similar to yourself. It was why when we got in touch, I really responded to what you were doing, because there is so many organizations do this thing. Oh, you did that job, therefore you're competent. Therefore, let's give you a promotion, and now you have to have a team do it. But they never really train you. There's this weird assumption that, like, oh, you were a good football player, so now you have to coach other footballers. It's like, that's why they have all these coaching badges, But companies often don't quite get that, or they do some sort of little tick-boxy nonsense. But that's of marginal benefit, if any,
Yeah.
And then wonder why this new leader isn't delivering. So.
Well, exactly. And they dress it up as though they're like rewarding you for your great work as well. Like, you did a really good job at this thing that you know how to do, that you're really good at, you've been doing for ages. To reward you for that, here's another completely different job that you don't know how to do, and I'm not going to tell you how to do it. Figure it out.
Absolutely.
But well done, you. Pat yourself on the back.
Well, the other irony is, like, when I'm working with a lot of business owners, particularly in their first few years, this happens where they're assembling a team and they're doing great work, which is why they're expanding, because they're making their clients or customers very happy and they're doing a great job. And they're gaining good reputation, and they need to hire people. And then all of a sudden, half the time, they find themselves in these management roles. Going, I didn't start my business to be a manager. I started my business to do the job I now have a team to do. So half the time, it's not for everyone, but half the time, the appropriate thing to do is bring in a business leader who will lead the business, an effective MD or CEO, depending on the size of the company. And then they choose and they sit in the, on the board, and they are directing the CEO. They have that influence, but they're not doing the day-to-day. And instead, they're doing what they love and where their greater strengths are. That's easier said than done for people who are promoted into management roles. But the point remains that they need some guidance and training, need some at least foundational skills to fall back on, rather than just, you innately know and your go-to behavioral ways of being happen to be brilliant leadership stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Or just figure it out. It's your problem, not mine. That
Exactly.
whole, yeah. It's an interesting point about the business owners as well, though. And I think, we've probably both seen a fair few of them over the years where they reach that point and there's almost like that identity crisis, isn't there? Because they get to that stage and they're like, well, I'm just doing paperwork, or I'm dealing with people problems, in inverted commas. That's not what I started this business to do. Like,
Exactly.
where's that exciting thing that I was doing 5 years ago that I'm not allowed to do anymore? And I think there's another escape route out of that, isn't there? So we've been talking a bit about solopreneurs recently. It's when you reach that point of decision before you start hiring this team, like, do you actually need to hire a team? Is it just ego telling you, success looks like a big team around me? Or
Right,
because there's a slip road there, isn't there? You can get off the train at the first station, whatever metaphor you like,
right.
before you found yourself in that problem. Like, if you started the business to do the thing you enjoy, then just keep doing the thing you enjoy.
Exactly, and hire the people for the things you don't enjoy.
Or don't hire, just outsource. Get freelancers,
sorry. When I said hire, I meant in the loosest sense of
yes.
Get somebody else to do it, whether they are on salary with you or outsourced. The point is the same, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. There's an expectations thing, isn't there? I think where the way people see successful business, inverted commas, and
and as you said, there's a lot of it unhelpful myth making around a lot of this stuff that we're talking about, where it sets certain expectations that may or may not be accurate, but are often unhelpful. Yeah,
indeed. So, going back to negotiation and the myths surrounding that, I'm going to say a word, and then I'd like to know what your feelings are about that word based on your work experience. Can you guess what that word's going to be?
No, actually.
It is compromise.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Compromise has its place, but it is a terrible way to start. So, and there's and as I say to a lot of my clients and in other ways students, compromise, like, you hear marriage is a compromise. It's like, well, is it? I mean, yes, in certain aspects, of course it is. But when studies have been done on this, that with people who, they may not use the label, but when they're behaviorally and their thinking and their expectations are more in keeping with marriage as a collaboration, those marriages tend to be an awful lot stronger. And it's the same with the business relationship interaction. Again, internally with your own staff, team, externally with clients, you name it, right? Is if you start with the question, how can both of us have 100% or more of what we want? Then you're in a good place, because then your expectations are right up in the corner of both of us getting what we need versus one of us getting more and the other not. And then it's kind of, because when you go into this relationship where it goes straight to compromise, it's only a little step further down that ladder toward bitterness and toward, well, what's the point really? And that kind of ROI thinking, the return on my time, effort, blah, 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 is, well, why bother? So divorce time, or I want a new job, or I want a new client, or whatever, right? So, I mean, I know we're simplifying things here, but I hope you take the point that the compromise thing is useful when things don't really matter. And what I mean by that is, like, you go to a little antiques fair, the guy wants 20, you say 10, you meet 14, 15, 16. Who cares, right? In the sense that it doesn't matter. Like, knowing the person's motivation and what they bought it for and all of these things. If you want to play the game, that's fine, right? But it really doesn't matter. Now, if you sort of go, well, I actually, run this thing over here, and if you give it to me for free, I'll give you this promotional thing on my newsletter next week, or I'll bring in 30 people to your stand or something. Then you're thinking in the bartering area, right? Which isn't a bad exercise to play. I mean, one of the thought exercises is, what could I give that would make this person give me the thing I want for free? So, because everybody goes to cash, which is the easiest, there's a reason we got rid of bartering and we just turned things into actual cash. Because otherwise things get very complicated, when, you're trying to give that person a sheep and they're trying to give somebody 2 hens and they're trying to give someone else a barrel of beer to give you some. That's why we invented money, right? Really handy. But the point is still there, is that it's often that thought experiment of what of perceived high value to them can I give, but at low cost to me, and vice versa. And that's where you start creating, the non-cash items, the intangibles. That's where you start insulating agreements or deals to a far higher level. I mean, one example, one client I worked with years ago, she was going out on her own as a consultant, and like a lot of consultants, one of the first gigs they get is being consulted back to their original company they worked with for quite a few years. And the company were asking her, to change, be flexible with them on the days a week she came in to work with them, right? So this is before too much remote work. And she was like, I'm not sure what the opportunity here is, because they're really already paying me very well. And there's probably not a great amount of movement on top of that money-wise. And even if there were, it's just being killed on tax anyway. And I'm like, I'm not really sure what to... So I asked her, well, what would you ideally want? And we talked about options to do with, shares or pension contributions. And that was kind of like, that's kind of marginally interesting, but wasn't really. And that is, by the way, always a useful thing, is when it's cash, not cash, right? It's like when they pay you in far more tax efficient ways, depending on some sort of gifted thing, when there's some sort of equity stake or share options. Some companies do that quite easily, some not. And it's a lot easier for them to do it. Others are paid into pension contributions. So it's being compounded over time. And, when you withdraw it, you're not getting fleeced on the tax. There's loads of those sort of things that you can enter into. And I would fully, particularly around contracts or jobs, people contracting, I'd fully encourage them to look at that full suite of potential options and look at what would suit them. As goes also days off, healthcare, days in lieu, flexible days, all these sort of things, work from home versus turning into the office, all that sort of stuff. There's loads of different things you can arrange. But with this consultant in particular, what we came up with, which I kind of asked her, was, well, what would really spur your business on? And long story short, she said, well, the project manager that I'm working with in this company, and she was an expert on, some sort of manufacturing niche thing for production line, blah, 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 right? High-techy stuff of this quite precision widgety things, right? And she sort of said, well, I suppose to know that guy's network, to be warmly introduced. So I said, well, why not do that? Because you can't, hence non-cash item, you really can't put a price on that, right? Nor can you stipulate in a contract, you need to warmly introduce me to people, right? But it can be an understanding. So it can be as light and as sort of fluffy and nebulous as that at times, in the sense of a person-to-person agreement where, he was like, yeah, I'm a big fan of your work. I'm happy to introduce you to people who I know from my previous experiences and my qualifications who do my job in other companies that would be perfect for you, which he did slowly over the course of the projects he was working with her on. She was introduced to a lot of his network that were key to her setting up her business and having a really good first year to, as a really good base. So this is the point, is that it's thinking in that creative way. And as I said, that's a lot of where the Innovation Academy thinking comes from. It's like, what else is possible here? What's the standard stuff? Great. What might be brilliant? But, what would just start with the classic, Covey stuff, start with the end in mind and all that sort of stuff. But in a really creative way, like take off the blocks. do the cliche think outside the box stuff, you know. Yeah, I'll pause it there a second.
Yeah, no, it's interesting stuff, and I love there's definitely a skill, isn't there, to being able to think in that innovative way and come up with ideas or look at situations in ways that no one else ever has.
But just to join it back into team management, team leadership, how well do people know their teams? I mean, when I work even with friends, you know, I'm like, they have their team, and I'm like, what does that person actually want to do or be in 3 years? And it's a shitty interview question. I hate that. But in essence, where do they really want to go? What's the work they want to grow into versus work that they're happy to kind of grow out of and push aside? When you know these things, where their ambitions lie, where their passions lie, where both outside but mostly inside work, then it allows you to actually relate to that person that bit better. I mean, you can see where they're coming from with certain thinking and decision making, and even showing an interest can help build that rapport that you actually give a damn about them as a person, rather than, you know, you're just a replaceable human, you know, meat bag, soon to be replaced by a robot as soon as possible. You know, that doesn't really engender good rapport and loyalty. Just saying.
Yeah. Trust and respect as well. I think for a leader to, you know, you can look at it from two directions, really, can't you? Like if you want to be like really mercenary and transactional about it, it still matters because it's the best, most effective way of achieving the most from that individual for the time that they work from you. But I don't like that perspective. I prefer the what's the right thing to do perspective, and the right thing to do, which just happens to build loyalty and trust and respect as well as a nice byproduct, is to support them, to understand their goals, to help them achieve those, etc. And I think one of the one of the classic examples of this, I think, in terms of like personal development at work and the way that you support your people, has always been for me that moment where, as a leader, if you fully support someone's self-development, that means they're leaving your organization. And so there's a decision point for you there. It doesn't always happen, but it usually comes in most careers. Like there won't be scope in the company for them to take that next step up or whatever. So if you want them to achieve that, they're going to have to go and do it somewhere else. And I think there's a lot of managers in the world who will therefore hold that progress back, stifle that selfishly because they want the high performer to stay with them, right?
I mean, you know, Robert Greene talks about this very specifically in Mastery, and one of his points was get a mentor. You know, so you're not learning all the things by yourself. But the problem with the mentor is when you're outgrowing the mentor in what you can learn. And what's very common is that even if they're very vocally, and most of them, again, we're not one person, even if most of the time, most of them is very supportive of you, there's another element which is like, I helped made you, you'd be nothing without me, all that sort of, there's a little bit of the ego kicking in there, and it can kick out in subtle and not so subtle ways, as you say, to that individual that they were mentoring. So there's very much, an established thing. Just to go back on the word, you know, you mentioned trust, and again in negotiation, it's kind of almost cliched, but the importance of trust cannot be really overspoken, in the sense there was research done on and where there's deals that are more transactionary versus deals where there's a measurable level of high trust. Danish negotiator, but also academic, did this, guy called Jensen. Very interesting. And it was between 30 and 35% more value. And notice I mentioned value, not just like revenue, because value can exist in many different forms. But I'm not getting into the research as to exactly how we quantified value, but it is that point that there was far more valuable exchange. And I heard on an interview recently with a very interesting fellow who had the belief, business owner who had the belief that a staff who are co-business owners would be far more innovative and productive than mere employees. So he ran a very brave experiment in his own company where he gave them essentially profit share. And he said, look, we're doing this as an experiment for 12 months, 18 months, whatever it was. And lo and behold, suddenly they're not employees. So when they're arguing for this, that, and the other, it's not solely from their sole benefit. They're suddenly, what's best for me and the company? What's best for our client base or customers? And suddenly when smaller things are wrong, how do we fix this to make it better? Why? Because now I'm an owner. I'm not just an employee who most of my interests, even if I'm, fully focused on a good person, I'm this, I'm that, and I'm conscientious, you're still like, I got to take care of me. I can't, not taking a hit here for the rest of you people if you're not, you know what I mean? So it's kind of a reasonable way to be. But as I said, by that change, it's that same idea that by him giving them the trust to do that, they reciprocated in kind. And it's the same that when you're in an agreement, and don't get me wrong, it's very difficult. I'm not saying, just have trust. Like, that is one of the toughest things, because what was found was that an awful lot, even with the intention, even knowing that, with the intention going in and having a more trusting relationship with their business working negotiation counterparts, people are on edge and they don't want to be taken advantage of. That's one of the great fears. So they go, well, I'm not sure. I better be, maybe that. And they misread cues always into the negative, because it's safer to misread cues into the negative, evolutionarily speaking. And so suddenly then both of them are tentative and both of them then have low trust. And so it's quite transactional. And not just in that one deal, but then the relationship has no insulation, as I would call it. When you have high trust, when you understand each other's situations, needs, even just the basic stuff of their actual KPIs of how they're judged, or they judge themselves, how they see success, all of these sort of things, then it's a lot easier to facilitate them winning and having you win. And again, it's not built in a day. Like, it's back and forth. I say something and I do it. You say something and you do it. And you're both delivering, and it's built slowly. So everything that I'm saying here, just if anybody's watching or listening, I'm not saying just go in there and be like, I want to teach the world to sing happy clappy stuff. You will get taken advantage of by less scrupulous people. Like, there's no way around that. Okay? I'm saying, you take care of you first. One of the first principles, is, because I don't know if that's a question when asked, but one of the key things, like, what are the fundamentals, like, people often miss, and other than do you negotiate, as I mentioned earlier, is once you establish yes you do, is what are my actual strengths and weaknesses, and see it from the counterpart's perspective as much as possible. See it from your audience or your counterpart's perspective, i.e., how do they see their problem? How do they see me potentially? That's number one. But then when you're looking at yourself, this is one of the greatest problems in negotiation, is people don't really know what their business actually is or does. I mean, they think they do. They do in a way. But when you ask them, and this, by the way, about a quick example, this happens in loads of big corporate stuff where the people negotiating aren't the people who are implementing at all, and they never have conversations. It's often a complete recipe for a disaster, right? One of the big areas in this is software engineers versus the teams of software salespeople. And the salespeople, bless them, they're doing their best job, but they really don't often understand the software in any depth. And what they really don't often understand is the cost. My cousin's a software engineer, as is a lot of us friends who run software companies and things. And they've told me this so many times. It's a huge problem, because the salesperson will often have used against them, right? The buyer side, one of the most powerful weapons the buyer can use is the phrase, and there's a lot of them, but by a magnitude, the most powerful one is one last thing. Which is, we're just ready to sign it, but just one, like, they get one last concession off you to get it over the line. And the salesperson's like, we're nearly there. Ooh, I better sign this thing. Yeah, what the hell? It's nothing, right? And they often don't realize, because they've no concept of cost, of how the thing came to be, they may have cut the profit margin by like 30%. With one tiny thing they think is, it's nothing. It's just a little giveaway. No, you need to know where you have very little margin on a thing. You need to know where there's loads of expanse and movement. You need to know, like, if you're delivering a thing, that if your standard is 14 days and they demand it's in 9, you need to know, well, can we do that? Or are we like the tiniest level of slack in the system, and then when we break that, they're going to punish me with a late fee for failing them to deliver it in the agreed time, which is often little things used against particularly smaller companies. It's loads of little things like that. But it's knowing your own margins in every way, in time, in delivery, in staffing, in if they ask for this, like how many person hours, man hours, whatever, is that in development? All of those sort of aspects of where you're really quite elastic and flexible and where you really can't be. And to have that kind of as another sheet with you when you're having those conversations.
You're triggering memories in me there as a reformed project manager. I mean, we used to dread the old completed sales file getting dropped on the desk, and it'd be the first we'd seen of it. And, God knows what's been promised. Thankfully, we got a lot better at it over the years. But
I mean, I'd say just on that then, like one of the first things with clients, particularly in smaller companies, but in bigger ones where it can, have what we call a horizontal team. So your vertical team is your line manager and your boss and all that up the way. Mm-hmm. And you need to be able to talk to them, because particularly if they're not in the room and they have to make a call and things, obviously. But people forget the horizontal. Who is it, up and down the chain, usually down the chain if you're selling the thing, where you can ruin their day, week, month, year by one thing. And equally, how can they mess up your time? Have a conversation. Literally sit or call them, email, whatever, and say, look, I'm sure there are things I do that wreck your head and certain things that without knowing, and vice versa. Can I buy you a cup of coffee / lunch or whatever, and we'll talk through, because I'd love to learn this so we don't fall into those traps. Shutting them up is half the problem. Like, you will learn so much. So it is a hugely valuable thing. But again, that's kind of an extension, next level of what my margins, where is tight, where it has serious flexibility.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the way you organize the business or however, and like reporting lines and org charts and all of that, is, to me, that's almost an irrelevance. I feel like the key part here is what the culture is like in the organization, and how well certain teams and functions talk between each other and between themselves, and whether you've got that open culture where people feel able to go and have those sorts of conversations, because that's not a given in a lot of companies.
Absolutely not. But again, when it's, and this again goes back to your project stuff, which, one of the great books on it was called, what was it? Leading Without Authority. And it is that principle of you're not their boss, neither are they. You're like, so in that way, you're weirdly neutral to each other in some ways, but you're not, because, you actually have this up and downstream effect. But that's where you can have those quite robust conversations, because in some ways they don't really care. So they're like, oh, well, you're asking? Really? You really want to hear this? Okay, boom. And they're, whoa, crap. Right. And the kind of the tsunami of information hits you. But it's getting then down to the 80-20, the few key things that both of you can do to make each other's lives that bit easier, And again, then, I never knew you did this. Blah, 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 blah. I mean, that came from, I remember when I was like 19, I worked in Aer Lingus, the Irish airline, down in the boarding department. So I'd put people on planes, basically. But what amazed me was the people in check-in, right? This is when you still checked in, showing my age. Not online. They do certain things that would make our lives downstream far more messy and difficult. Except when it was someone who had worked in boarding, because often those people work in one and then they move to the other. And it always fascinated me about that upstream, downstream effect. And, I've read about it since and whatnot, but it's always just a simple example of how you can mess up somebody's day or make it super simple and flowing by just doing one or two little things different that don't seem to make a difference to you. But those conversations are key, most definitely. Absolutely.
And sometimes it is just that, isn't it? It's understanding what other people need to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's as simple as just having a conversation.
Absolutely.
Or drop me a 2-minute text, an hour before something happens, so I can be ready for it. It's those little informal things, isn't it?
Yeah, and that often people don't think of.
Yeah.
But it's then having that conversation, this will ruin your man's day, or this person's, I don't want to mess her around because she's a nice person. She does a good job. So I'll just do this one little thing. It takes 20 seconds. Or you do the thing like this rather than like that. And suddenly things are a lot clearer again for that person downstream of that effect. Yeah.
True for leadership as well. Sometimes it's those smallest little things or words that make the biggest difference.
Over communicate. Risk over communicating than under communicating. That is a key one. Who was it? James Bernard Shaw said, who was it said? Anyway, said the greatest myth about communication is that it happened. So, and nothing like we all know the cliches of women and men in romantic engagements where, the woman is like, I was so clear about it. And the guy obviously has absolutely no idea because she didn't just say the thing 3 times in as clear a way as possible for a man to understand. But again, there's a similar parallel there in business scenarios where you think you had that conversation, but you haven't quite necessarily, you're in assumption land, and it's again why negotiation, we write things down as clearly as possible.
Yeah. I mean, I think email is the biggest culprit for so much of that, isn't it? Like assuming somebody's read the email. So many misunderstandings have resulted from that.
That's an art in itself, in how to, even just in the design of your emails, where you use caps, where you use bold. See, instead of just a few paragraphs of text, just break it down so that a skim can, right, got it. Okay. Absolutely.
Yeah. It comes back to knowing the people you're working with, I think. Because again, like there's a lot of people that email is the worst way of communicating with them. However you format it. It's just not for them. Yeah. They need to hear it with their ears.
Exactly, or getting a quick Zoom call or whatever the equivalent. Yeah.
But if you don't know them well enough, you're not going to know that. And again, we're back into the land of assumptions, aren't we?
Very dangerous territory. Yes. Very dangerous.
So I'm slightly conscious of time. We've lost track of it a little bit.
That's all right.
I think we've covered most of the big topics already, but there's a couple that I really want to ask you about. Firstly, I really want to hear the story of your first ever negotiation. How did it go, and what did you learn from it?
I don't remember my first negotiation because again, it depends on the definition of negotiation.
Okay, well, you can define it how you like, but
there were a few substantial ones because I talked about the first client's negotiation, where specifically around gains in negotiation, which by the way worked out very well. Sorry, that was the finish of that story. Just to polish that one up, they were able to actually get fully into their counterparts' KPIs, and they were far simpler than they'd expected. There was like one metric the other side cared about.
Wow!
So when they could turn the thing around to facilitate that metric, then the guy was like, "Yeah, I can help you out with this, this, and this, no problem." It was much more open because he was like, "Look, are you being judged on these 3 things?" And the guy was like, no, just this one. One of the other ways we did that is I managed to get in, not that guy's predecessor, but a guy in the same company he used to work with, different department, but could tell him exactly what the approach was for his counterpart. And it was such okay. And then, in the actual talking to the counterpart, that was just clarifying, confirming, and then working out the deal. And the counterpoint was they assumed to get into the other side's other territories, which they wanted to expand into, they'd virtually have to start again. Whereas in actual fact, no, you're on the system. So we just basically copy and paste you over. It takes like a day, not a year. And it was that level of, oh, really? So again, talking about dangerous assumptions, they can be good and bad. We can fall into the, oh, they'd never do this, or, oh, that's not possible. It's like, ask the question, be curious, find out. But all of it is on the basis of try and presume nearly nothing. Assume nothing, presume nothing, and go from there. And that's where you can find some really, really cheap, nearly free value of massive, benefit add Fairly quickly. No, not always, but they are there and they pop up and they're like, whoa, that's a game changer. And all because you just question an assumption, which loads of people told you, oh, that's the way it is. It's like, okay, well, let's just ask the question. Sorry. So my first, my first negotiation. There were quite a few because I used to sell a ton of art when I was in the gallery, and then when you go out on your own. This is just to say, just an interesting one that I mentioned to people, and they sort of go, "Oh yeah, I got that." Like when I was in the art gallery and selling, and I was on salary, and it was a bonus, but it was you're on salary. That's when I was what you might call a natural negotiator. You're just flowing with it. You're loving the game, I think, is the key phrase there for the emotional state. Whereas when you're out and you're on your own, and suddenly I was this what you call nice but nervous, where you're not quite as playful, you're not quite as creative at all, you're not as resourceful, And I was like, what the hell changed? I used to be amazing at this, Jesus. And so, and it's because the stakes are much higher. It's literally, I have plenty of money for this, that, and the other, for going on holidays and all sorts of stuff, versus it's going to be a really thin month, and so suddenly there's these big stakes, and so you're taking yourself nearly emotionally hostage. And so that's when I kind of was reading a lot more of the negotiation books, sales and negotiation stuff. And to get to what I call supernatural, where you're because a lot of people think, oh, so you're just going to help turn me into a natural. It's like, no, because naturals are very good with a select, usually very narrow, we talked about earlier, narrow go-to behavior patterns, which work for them often. Sometimes it's 4 to 5 times, sometimes it's 9 out of 10 times. But sooner or later, that the usual pattern that they try suddenly fails utterly, and they don't know why, and they don't know how to fix it. And so that's why you need to bring the two up, whether you're nice but nervous or you're a natural. And the other thing is situational as well. Some people are a disaster with their kids, they give in, but they're brilliant in a boardroom, and others are the opposite way around. So not always, but so it is situational, where they're able to get great deals, they're able to maneuver their kid really quite well, have them feel good about the decision of not getting what they want. Amazing. That's an amazing negotiation, right? But they're pushed around in the business arena. So anyway, what we're trying to get them is both of them to be able to, manage their mental, emotional states and get creative, bring in the other side, build that rapport, build the start of that trust, and then starting to find creative ways to add value for both of you that insulates the deal from any third party coming in and kind of interrupting her. Because it's like, well, this person's a bit cheaper, but that person really understands my needs. And it's just so much mess to try and even hope that they could equal some of that. And again, the non-tangible stuff that you've created between each other. So when I was an art dealer, as I said, I was very much nice but nervous. When I went out on my own, having been natural. And that really came to a head when I met myself and my business partner at the time. I was out my own a lot of the time, but for the first while I was with a business partner who still very good friends with, and he's doing very well in his own startup, so very proud of him. Anyway, we went to, and I remember he was a construction company owner, and his wife we'd weirdly bumped into where we were offering this painting, very quite unique painting from an Irish artist, to a gallery owner, and she happened to be in the gallery. And the guy was like, yeah, a little steep for me. No, it's perfect. It's an amazing piece. Yeah, but I'm not taking any more of these at the moment, blah, blah, blah. And she waited for us outside. And we came out and she was like, almost jumped us. Sorry, I couldn't help overhearing. Can we go over there and have a coffee and can I look at this thing? And she was a surgeon. And she said, look, will you come to the house tonight? My husband will pay you, but I need to be on call and I'm in surgery tonight. We're like, oh, right, yeah. So we go to this very swanky house. And in we go, very nice fella, but quite a character, It's like, oh God, where's this going? And then, of course, he's in construction. So basically, he negotiates with hard asses all day in every direction. Right? So that was a learning curve. He was like, right, lads, come on now, and you say this price, you'll take this, boom. And we said, now we were already, shall we say, low on options, right? So we said, well, that's all very well, but we have another client down in Cork who's very interested, who's bought from us before. Just so we didn't think, I don't know if he knew it was a ploy or not, but we went outside or into a different room and had a chat. And my friend just went, this guy's, in negotiation, and he's a poker player. I know he's a poker player. This guy, he's going to be in serious, he thinks he has all the hand, but he's going to be in serious trouble if his wife gets home and we walked out the door with the piece that she thought was the best thing since sliced bread, right? So it's again knowing where your value is, what value you're bringing to the table, and the cost of the removal of that potential from the other side, which is something I learned very viscerally that night. So we, by the way, we made sure to leave it. We put it in his hand when we walked out to the other room. So we're in the living room, we walked into the kitchen or something, which is the old sales trick of you're not just there, you're actually taking it out of their hands. So it's like, you have it and now I'm removing it from. We came in, took it off his hands and said, sorry, that's far too low. That price is completely unacceptable. And we'd prefer to give it because your wife is lovely, really liked her vibe. She was cool. And, give her our very best, but we'll be selling it to the guy down in Cork. And he was like, oh, hold on a second. Oh, no, lads, hold on a second. Who stole the ball there? And so all of a sudden, he was paying the price asked, and we were having whiskeys, and he was, oh, you guys are great. You're going to go very far, and blah, 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 blah. So that wasn't my first negotiation, but that was very much the first kind of high stakes. There was quite a lot of money at the time. There was a lot riding on it at the time, and we were running out of options at the time. So, so it was an early on one that sticks out in the mind.
Love it. Yeah, great story as well. Very well told.
Thank you. I'll send it to the business partner and see what he says. So that's completely wrong, Al. You forget everything.
That's not what happened at all.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I think we've probably covered most, if not all, but certainly a fair few. And I think you've probably covered some great tips already as well for anyone who's perhaps a small business owner, perhaps trying to get the best outcome they can dealing with the large companies. I mean, are there any other final thoughts you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'll give a few. I mean, I have a few what you might call evergreen principles, and I've mentioned one or two. I mentioned, think like a shrink. So this idea of being emotionally non-reactive. And I have various methods to help people do that, again, from coaching and psychotherapy skills, how to manage your mental and emotional states. And just to say, the reason we do that is the more in control you are, the less emotional need you have for a specific outcome. So the less desperate you are, and hence that can't in any way be used against you. And equally then, the more in control of your emotional states, the more you can influence in a positive way your counterpart to influence their thinking, their behavior, and then indeed their actions. So it is kind of somebody, people call it, the Jedi stuff. It's like, well, it's not quite, but it's not magic and it's not coercion, but it is more through, ethical influencing. So that would be one. The other that people can do far more of straight away, because that's easier said than done, but more straight away is that idea, as I said, is no is not the end, no is the beginning, is another principle of mine, which is you suggest something and they say no. Suggest it in the first place. Don't presume they're going to say no. So that's even the pre-point to that, which we talked about earlier. But even if you suggest it or suggest your main offer, whatever that might be, or solution, or whatever, and they say, oh no, that doesn't work for us, or whatever, don't sort of go, don't get sad or don't get mad, get curious. Like, most people just hear no and they go, oh, okay, oh, never mind, okay, get curious, go, oh, that's interesting. Do you mind if I ask you, what is it about that doesn't quite, work for you? Or we're just curious. And what so many people find is that maybe 20% of the time, the client actually misunderstood something. Maybe you explained it poorly. Maybe they had a preconceived idea. And you can go, oh, no, that's not what I mean at all. We can do it like that. Oh, you can do it like that. Oh, wow. And then suddenly your deal is back alive again, right? So sometimes there's a misunderstanding that one or both of you have missed. There's an assumption, there's the word again, that the other side are often making, or an assumption on your part that they understand a certain thing or it is a certain way. It's like, no, I'm totally flexible on that. No problem. Bang, you have a deal. That might only be 20-25% of the time. But the other reason to ask is that at the very least, you're getting an insight into their needs, into how they see their own pains and situation, into the sorts of solutions they need or don't need, and then how they see you potentially fitting into that. And right at this moment, how you're not fitting into that as the solution. And remember, like when people say, no, that doesn't really work for you, I said, but getting curious, no means, unless they say, no, we'll never, ever buy from you ever. We hate you. Then it's like, okay, well, then you still get curious. Well, what is it about that you hate? At least you're learning something. But so if you get curious on no, that doesn't really work for us, it's like, it doesn't work for you like that, like now, at that price, in that way, on those terms. So what is it like here that we could, if you had a magic wand that you could change that would work for you? Now, maybe that's not deliverable because it's totally unreasonable, and that's fine, but at least you know. But half the time you can go, oh, no, we can do a version of that at this price point. And then, the point is, no is the end of one conversation, the beginning of a whole other strand, a tangent of conversation. It's very important. And I suppose then the last one is a principle I call not a photo, a sculpture. And it's how to think of your deals, because if you think of like a photograph, on your phone or printed out, you move around that and you're seeing the same image. Nothing more is coming to light. Whereas with a sculpture, you move around it and you're seeing whole new aspects to it. That's the beauty of it being a 3D thing. But most people almost always default to thinking of agreements or deals as a 2D photograph, as this yay or nay, black or white, 0-1 type of thing. Even if they think there's a little bit of movement, but not much. It's like a little, like a hologram, just kind of moves from there to there. No, think of it like a sculpture. What else is possible here? What else is a way to do it? How would you do this for free? How would they do this for free? That's why they're good thought experiment questions, because that starts to get you thinking as to value you can give to each other that's a bit more intangible. And the last point I'd say is, be clear, as I said earlier, on all the costs and where is flexible and where is really not inflexible. That's absolute given. But the next stage after that is, where are your points of differentiation? As Drucker said, all business really is marketing and innovation, right? And innovation is, what do we do differently, our points of differentiation, and then how do we talk about that is marketing. Essentially, if you really want to be down to the core, in my opinion, anyway. So it's being able to talk about that. So somebody says, well, because so many people, even when they like you and they like your business, will still go into commoditizing you when it comes down to it. So do not let them compare you apples to apples or oranges to oranges. You go, no. You're talking about apples, we're oranges because of this, and this that are unique to us. And therefore you have perceived value. By the way, this is similar for hiring. Why should I work for you rather than your competitor? It's the same for, lawyers and accountants. I always ask this question. They're always like, oh, we give better services. Like, do you? Whereas when somebody says, well, we have 212 star reviews on Google and our star rating is 4.7. So it's like, wow, a lot of people were happy with you. So yes. So that's a point of differentiation, saying we're good service. So what? That's a baseline acceptance. What do you do uniquely compared to your competitors? So I think we should probably pause there.
I could keep listening. There's some great tips in there. I particularly love the feedback loop. I think that's important for so many things. Obviously in a business, whenever you're trying to sell something, understanding why somebody chose not to buy it or is giving you the signals they don't want to. Yes, even if it's only 20 to 25% of people that there is a misunderstanding there, it's still worth asking, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's worth asking for the other 75, 80% as well, because then next time you talk to somebody like them, you might be able to head that off.
Absolutely.
Or improve your service in the meantime.
Improve your service. Exactly, where you go, wow, we were not actually a brilliant product market fit here, because maybe the market's evolved, expectations have changed. How do you adapt? So you can learn so many things. And again, it's coming with this attitude. So it's a bit like the think like a shrink thing, where you're emotionally regulated, not non-emotional, but non-reactive. but in a different way. As you said, you're looking for hints of things. You're looking for clues. You're acting a little bit like a detective. What's really going on? This is being said to me, but what are the needs underneath? And then you can probe and gently, respectfully ask certain ways to get more of that information, But the key is curiosity to all of that. But again, same with team leadership or management, where, it's what studies done on, hundreds of CEOs, what makes an average CEO different to the top few percent of CEOs. It's not qualifications. It's not experience. One of the big one is curiosity and rapport. That you are genuinely curious about your product, about your customers. You're genuinely curious about what your people are, what makes them tick.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Well, on that note, 2 questions left, if I may.
Go for it.
They're hopefully quick ones. We'll see. That's kind of in your hands.
I feel I've been over-answering some of the early ones. Proceed.
Yeah, I mean, they both lend themselves to either really short answers or really long ones, so it's entirely up to you. But the first one, if you could go back in time to the start of your career, what advice would you give your younger self?
That's a really good question. There's a few things, but I think it would probably boil down to don't delay. So it wasn't like I was lazy, right, by any stretch. But when certain opportunities came along, like favors, you did me a great turn there, thank you so much. I'll put it this way, and it's a principle I learned way too late. People ask, psychologists ask, are favors like bread or wine? Do they get better or do they decay over time? And the answer is both. So to the one who is giving the favor as a part of reciprocity, they're bread. To the one who's receiving the option of a favor, their wine, they go up over time in, I did that guy on the day. You're like, that was just a nice gesture I did for him, and he'll do something. That was amazing. I really came through for that guy, and the opposite for the other person, right? So the idea is if somebody does you a favor, cash that in sooner rather than later, because I had some very good opportunities offered to me for like some serious media coverage and serious introductions to certain people and things like this. And I was like, that's amazing. Thank you very much. But I was like, I'm not ready quite yet. I need to get this one thing in place. And of course I delayed. And some of these massive opportunities I never actually acted on. And that's one of those, not regrets because they're learning curve things, but you do kind of wonder, like, I wonder if I jumped a bit earlier, what would have happened? So that's the younger self one.
It's a tough question to answer, this one, I think. Because I think everyone has that sort of thing certainly in their business journey, where there was maybe, as you say, like an opportunity we didn't pick up on until too late, or something we said no to that we should have said yes, or the other way around quite a lot as well. Something we said yes to that we definitely shouldn't have done. And I think that's one of the things I've really struggled with as a business owner almost from day one. That fear at the beginning, you say no to a lot of things, and then very soon that turns into the same fear making you say yes to the wrong things.
Yeah.
And then you go through cycles of that, I find. But
you do.
Anyway.
You do.
Right. Well, as I say, conscious of your time and not wanting to steal too much more of it, the last question I have, which is my favourite one, but no pressure. Right. So this is Leadership Heroes.
Leadership Heroes.
So if you had to pick one person, but it could be anyone you could think of, they could be alive or dead, past or present, real or fictitious as well if you like, but it's got to be someone who, in your opinion, would perfectly embody leadership. So who would that be for you and why?
There's a few, as you would imagine. And I know that the cliches are probably, Winston Churchill and Abraham Lincoln and whatnot. And for good reason, by the way, not to mention Nelson Mandela. And I'm gonna split it because I refuse A-B answers. I won't be pigeonholed or given ultimatums. No, so on the Nelson Mandela front, remarkable because everybody thought at the time, people forget, everybody thought there'd be a very bloody civil war at nearly best. There'd be huge civil strife, yet he managed this really smooth, comparatively speaking, to expectations, transition in power. You can talk about things that went wrong afterwards, that's a different thing, but remarkable. And why? Because he had this amazing understanding, empathetic sense of learning from his counterpart / opponent, the Afrikaners. He learned their language, he read their history, he read from their perspective, not just, independent. So he's getting into how they were seeing the world and their worldview. And then, oddly enough, I actually have as much respect for F.W. de Klerk, his opposite number, who history is largely forgotten, who bravely said, you know what, this thing isn't working. How we are doing things is not sustainable long term. We can't continue doing this. And had the bravery to flip it. Had the bravery to say, I'm going to take radical action here. And he was the one who, was releasing Mandela, who set all that stuff up under pressure from all sides, but it was still a remarkably brave and insightful thing to do. And he did it, as he said, by offering vision. I remember he spoke at my university. He was very impressive. And he said, I don't believe in taking opinion polls to create policy. He said, I believe in creating a vision. And then people either say, I'm for that vision, or that's not so interesting for me, which is very interesting. The last one, very different, is probably Ernest Shackleton. The Shackleton expedition has got a lot of new media the last 10 or 20 years. He was kind of more of a childhood hero of mine. And Tom Crean, actually, there was quite a few Irish chaps on that voyage, and one of them was a Cork man called Tom Crean. Remarkable characters, all of them. But what Shackleton did in that sense of emotional regulation, like you're at the end of the world and there's a world war going on, so support is not going to be happening much. And he managed to get all his men home safe out of a total disaster. So this is odd parallel to Dunkirk there, where some would say it wasn't really a victory. It bloody well was, remarkable team leadership, keeping the cohesive group, not letting them fall into despair, which would be very easy, and having them all marshal their best selves toward a group goal, which was an extremely difficult task. And as I said, profoundly skillful at putting that team together and getting the result they needed, that none of them died on that expedition.
Yeah, I think both of those have been chosen before, but not very often. I think you're only the second person to choose Shackleton.
We'll go with that. I feel like doing a follow-up and remember.
Yeah, I mean, he's such an interesting character. And some of the things they did on that last trip as well, just madness. Like, they had no right for those things to work.
No.
Like the moment where they're just barreling down like the side of this ice mountain.
Could have been
on an improvised sledge.
Yeah.
With no idea what's at the bottom, except we can see a ship over there. We've got to do it. Like,
we got to do it. No choice. Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's it, I guess. Maybe it was perfectly rational because
it's a rational, and it's still, brave.
Brave, absolutely. I highly recommend that if you ever find yourself down in Cornwall in England. There is a shipwreck and Shackleton museum there, and it is excellent.
I was actually in Punta Arenas in Chile.
Okay.
I think it was Punta Arenas, in the Straits of Magellan anyway. Mm-hmm. And Tierra del Fuego is right on the other side there. And there was this crew of shipbuilders who, as a fun project, built exact scale replicas of Darwin's Beagle, the Santa Maria of Columbus, amongst others. But they had Shackleton's tiny little boat that he sailed to South Georgia, and it is not much bigger than a rowboat. It was amazing, and it really brought it home to me. I was like, oh my God, you managed to kind of hit, like, with 1 degree off of accuracy, you would have been totally dead. And Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Seriously impressive. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's people who would, I think the majority of people, actually, if not everyone currently alive, would struggle to do that with all of our modern equipment and GPS and
Absolutely.
all these other things. And he did it with like a compass and seeing the stars. In fact, did he even have a compass? Didn't that get lost at one point?
I don't know. I can't remember that part. But
yeah. Anyway, yeah, very, very, very cool. And Nelson Mandela as well. I mean, excellent choice for so many reasons. And the originator of one of my favourite quotes on leadership as well, which
what's
I
that?
always butcher. But the one about what people look for in leaders is standing between them and danger. But then when the danger's gone, is standing at the back and letting them take the credit for the good works. Which is not word for word. I paraphrased it.
No, we get the concept.
But I mean, that whole sentiment of leadership is something I've always hugely aspired to. So
yeah, and it's an interesting point just to finish on, is taking the ego out of leadership, and you can do much better at negotiation when you take the ego out of it. It's kind of the quote. It wasn't Eisenhower; it was his predecessor. He said, you can get an awful lot done if you're not desperate to take credit for it. And that's a great quote for team lead. You take blame and you give credit very generously. You'll go far.
Absolutely.
People will be, I want to work for this person.
Definitely, and the results will be way better as well, I think. But,
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Al, thank you so much for being with us today and for being so generous with your time as well. The last small thing I'll ask you is if anyone wants to learn more about you and what you do, perhaps if they're looking for some help with negotiation or communication, where can they go?
They can. Well, I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. You can look me up there, Alistair McBride. But probably better again, because people misspell Alistair all the time, is almcbride.com. So almcbride.com. And there you can find some goodies. You can buy my book, Dealing with Goliath, The Psychological Edge in Negotiation for Business Owners, on Amazon. I think it's still marked down, so it could be very good value. But if you just want a PDF copy, if you're happy with that, you can get one from my website. As I said, almcbride.com/book. I also have a podcast, the Dealing with Goliath podcast, where we talk about all sorts of issues around that business owners are challenged by, not least negotiation. And as I said, I'm very active on LinkedIn. So reach out, say hello.
Lovely. Well, I can certainly highly recommend the podcast, of course. And the book's on my Christmas list. So there you go.
Good. Excellent.
Well, have a great rest of your day. And thanks again for being here.
You too. Thank you, David. Cheers.
Thank you, Al, for a great conversation there. Loads of relevant stories and practical advice on communicating effectively, negotiating ethically, and just having more productive conversations, all of which are key skills for leaders. So, listener or viewer, do check those links in the description, visit Al's website, listen to his podcast. I highly recommend episode 97 for totally unbiased reasons. And do reach out to him if you want to know more about what he does. I'm sure he would love to hear from you. And if you're new to leadership, you feel like you're making it up as you go, you're struggling to build that all-important rapport and respect with your team, then come and join the Integrity Leaders community. Be a part of a supportive group of leaders where you can gain clarity on your leadership style so you can stop second-guessing yourself and lead with more confidence. All of which within a safe, non-judgy space where questions are encouraged, venting frustrations is understood, and you can seek advice or share your experiences with other leaders, people who get it. The link is in the show notes too, or you can visit www.leadingwithintegrity.co.uk, hit that green button on the homepage, and it will take you to the sign up for the community. Always feel free as well, find me on LinkedIn, drop me a DM, ask for a chat. More than happy anytime to answer questions or just have a conversation about leadership. That's all for today. Thank you for being here. I hope you'll be back again next week as I talk with former US diplomat, executive coach, and leadership speaker Michael Dillard. And until then, be a leader, not a boss.